Okay, guys, so the causes of we're doing the causes of unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Like I said, this is the type that you want in this in these neonates. It's the type that you want. So the causes there include things like, so the classification that we have is you've got physiological hyperbilirubinemia or physiological jaundice. Now people they term that benign hyperbilirubinemia, neonatal or just benign hyperbilirubinemia. So it can be physiological, it can be pathological, and then you can also have what they call breast milk hyperbilirubinemia, or you can have what they call lactation failure hyperbility. So there's a special category of pathological jaundice that I'm gonna just do this. They call it the hemolytic disease of the newborn. Now, I want us to look at physiological jaundice and pathological jaundice. So when you've got a neonate who's got hyperbilirubinemia, you take the blood, the TSB, you take the conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, you take that, and then also the unconjugated. What you want an unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. And once you get that, these are the differentials of an unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Like I said, conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, that's not your patient. Same day, that patient needs to go for further investigations, further imaging, and all of that, and possible surgical intervention. But with unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, it could be that they are having just physiological hyperbilirubinemia, which is okay, or they just have breast milk hyperbilirubinemia, or they have lactation failure hyperbilirubinemia. Most sources of information, when you look at them, they will say this is breast milk jaundice, and then they will say this is breastfeeding jaundice. And sometimes it's not a very difficult concept to understand, but I prefer to put lactation failure for breastfeeding jaundice. Because remember, there's breast milk jaundice, then there's breastfeeding jaundice, right? Okay, so when we have an unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, these are our differentials. But if we had conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, then our differentials will be different from this. Now, let's look at let's sort of like tabulate the differences between physiological and pathological. So this will be physiological, and then this will be pathological. That's why, guys, I want to urge you to really grasp important concepts in all rotations that you go to. Because imagine having a patient, a neonate who's got hyperbilirubinemia. They present with jaundice and they've got conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. But you keep them in the ward under the phototherapy. That would be very unfortunate and embarrassing, because phototherapy is meant to conjugate. But because you thought that you are dealing with physiological jaundice, whereas you are dealing with a conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, so you kept the patient in the ward under phototherapy until they complicated and everything. So that would mean that keeping a patient, a neonate who's got conjugated hyperbilirubinemia under phototherapy, I mean, there is no scientific sense there. But if you cannot appreciate the classification of hyperbilirubinemia and the causes under each, then it becomes very difficult to actually put in place management that actually is helpful and that makes sense. Okay, physiological jaundice. It's very common. It's very common. It's a time where it's like transition. It's normal. It's normal. There's nothing pathological about it, and we are gonna see why do neonates get this kind of jaundice. So, but what is important is that for us to say it's physiological, the jaundice must develop after 24 hours at least. Jaundice that develops within 24 hours, it points to trouble. And when this jaundice or hyperbilirubinemia occurs, hyperbilirubinemia, the neonate must not be sick, must not have any signs and symptoms of being sick, like not feeding, diarrhea, lethargy, vomiting. They shouldn't be sick. And obviously with pathological jaundice, there may be plus minus, there may be some signs and symptoms of being sick. So physiological jaundice shouldn't last more than 2 weeks. This will persist until the problem is addressed, right? And this the rate at which the bilirubin accumulates in the blood is also important. These ones, the accumulated rate of greater than 5 milligrams per deciliter per day. These ones is less than that. When you do your blood, make sure that you put the sets or the gender and the exact age, because that's where you get reference values. So important, guys. This is your TSB, right? Your total serum bilirubin. And there shouldn't be any signs and symptoms of hemolysis. With pathological, you might have or you might not have. If the cause is hemolysis, you will have. But if the cause of the unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia is not hemolysis, then you will not have. You should not have things like, you shouldn't have organomegaly, like you shouldn't have hepatomegaly. This one you can have, you might not have, depending. You shouldn't have splenomegaly. You might have, you might not have. So can you appreciate this, guys? So you shouldn't have things like pale stools. This side, if you've got obstructive jaundice, then you will have, depending on what is happening, what is the cause. And I think I have also with dark urine. Once you've got dark urine, then it's no longer physiological jaundice. No dark urine. Right? So there are other things that I looked at, guys, but the most important things I think I have covered. This is how you shouldn't have, I think this is very important, you shouldn't have jaundice in the first 24 hours of life. You shouldn't have. Some people, so you shouldn't have physiological jaundice in the first 24 hours of life. Some say even in the first 36 hours, you shouldn't have. You see? So you shouldn't have. So, once you've got jaundice and you've got some of these things here which are not supposed to be here, don't keep that patient and say it's physiological jaundice. Classify as pathological, investigate further, and if you're in a center where you cannot, where you have to refer that baby. Okay, let's just clear space, guys, so that we can talk about okay, let me just put the causes of unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia right there so that we can keep them in mind. So it said it's physiological, and we said it's pathological, also said breast milk and lactation failure. Those are the causes. So I want you guys to really get this. When you've got unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, you can't say when you've got conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, you can't say it's physiological jaundice. It's not. You can't say it's breast milk or lactation failure, because it's not. Right? That's very, very important. Now let's talk about, now we have compared physiological jaundice or physiological hyperbilirubinemia with pathological hyperbilirubinemia. Okay, now Let's talk about physiological hyperbilirubinemia. Why do they get this? It's the commonest, guys. It's the commonest. It's the commonest. So why do they develop this? We all know that you get red cell breakdown and you produce unconjugated bilirubin, and it's taken to the liver, it's conjugated by the enzyme and it is excreted in the GIT, and then when it comes this side, it's now conjugated. I've been explaining this, so if you have not seen, I'll put a link for the video where I explain this. So conjugated bilirubin, and then it's converted to uro by the bacteria there to urobilin, and then urobilin is like we said yesterday that conjugated bilirubin cannot be reabsorbed. It can't be reabsorbed from the intestines back to the body. But once bacteria convert this to this molecule can be reabsorbed. That's why you find it going now back into the liver in what they call that anterior hepatic circulation. This part of this also goes and is excreted in the urine. The bacteria, they come in again and convert this. Pay attention to that. I said bacteria, normal flora. They convert urobilin into stechobilin. Stechobilin is excreted in the feces, right? So this is in a normal person. But now with neonates, the first problem that they have, is that their red blood cells, they've got a short lifespan. So there's a lot of hemolysis taking place because of that short lifespan. And once the red cell has been broken down and bilirubin has been produced, the neonates liver cells, they still struggle because they are still immature. They still struggle with the uptake of unconjugated bilirubin. Number 3, the enzyme that conjugates unconjugated bilirubin into conjugated, that UGT1A1 enzyme, is deficient in neonates. So these are the reasons why we get this kind of jaundice in the neonates. Another reason is that once some bacteria makes it to here to be conjugated, once some bilirubin makes it to this other side and is conjugated, the bacteria, the neonate's GIT system does not have bacteria. So they don't get to a point whereby their conjugated bilirubin gets to form stechobilin and is excreted via the feces. So because of that, neonates, they've got an enzyme that is able to convert this unabsorbable conjugated bilirubin to a molecule that can be reabsorbed. So instead of in a normal person, I'll say a normal person, a lot of this gets to this and is excreted, a lot of it, and it leaves the body. But now if you don't have bacteria that can convert this into this and stecopilin, you end up having an enzyme that actually converts conjugated bilirubin into an absorbable molecule. Now you're gonna have a lot of bilirubin making this going to this direction instead of going out. So this is what they call the anterior hepatic circulation. So in neonates, the anterior hepatic circulation is the number one cause of hyperbilirubinemia. The anterior hepatic circulation. It's a very big thing. So if anyone ever asks you what is the cause of neonatal hyperbilirubinemia, just talk about the anterior hepatic circulation and then mention the other things later on. That's physiological jaundice, guys. Now let's talk about let's talk about lactation first. With lactation failure, what is important between these two, the first thing is that you must appreciate that this one happens within happens after 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, this one, and peaks at 3 weeks. This one happens within the first week of life, the breast milk. So lactation failure, hyperbilirubinemia, the problem there is that there's a problem with lactation. Either the baby, the neonate is not sucking well, or whatever the case might be, but is not. So now because of that, there's decreased intake of calories, decreased intake of fluids, they get dehydrated, and that alone triggers anterior hepatic circulation. I'm talking about lactation failure now. So I'm saying with lactation failure, hyperbilirubinemia, the neonate is not feeding well because of different reasons. That's why they encourage that as soon as possible, the neonates should start, they should do the kangaroo mother care should be started, and then the neonate should start breastfeeding as soon as possible. So lactation failure, hyperbilirubinemia, you've got a neonate who's not feeding well because of whatever reasons. Maybe mom's nipples are cracked, or there's poor sucking, any cause, or the mother is not experienced, whatever cause. But the bottom line is that the neonate ends up not getting enough fluids, enough calories. They become dehydrated, they get hyponatremia, and then that alone, the dehydration and all of that, triggers an anterior hepatic circulation. Once you've got an anterior hepatic circulation that is exaggerated, your bilirubin does this instead of doing this. It does this, does that, and then the accumulation continue. The red cell lifespan is going to continue being short, but you're not excreting any bilirubin, so you get hyperbilirubinemia. That's what lactation failure, hyperbilirubinemia is.